Is Ben Weiss, and he's coming up on the panel right now. He's Chicago-based and has these machines all over the country, all over the world. We also have Gabriella Kuss from the digital, I say DCA. Is that right, DCA? She is a force to be reckoned with. This is somebody who helped organize the economies in Yemen and Kosovo after their brutal times. And Mike Perry is going to moderate from Distributed Ventures. And we have one more person coming up, Samir.
Okay, I'll see it. All right, see it.
There he is. Samir is the Deputy Mayor of the City of Chicago. So I think that it was a great tie-in, people asking Brett about why he's in Chicago and people talking about Chicago. This panel is Crypto in Chicago. So give him a hand.
Yeah, I was just telling Brett he should come join us because he stole a lot of our thunder on why Chicago and the community. But what I'm so excited about for this panel in particular is we've been hearing a lot about innovation, just what entrepreneurs are doing globally, how investors are engaging. But at the end of the day, anything decentralized starts somewhere and somehow. And I think the community in Chicago is an amazing place to do that. And I'm lucky to be joined by three peers that have incredible experience across all sectors, from building startups from the ground up to engaging at local growth and how we drive economic value, to dealing with all the regulatory issues that we have. So really excited to kick this off today. And with that said, the first thing we really want to chat about is essentially what is the landscape of all things Web3 and crypto in Chicago. So I figured, Ben, you've been building for multiple years. Why don't you give us a little kickoff here?
Yeah, I think Chicago is the most exciting place to be right now. I can't think of another place in the country where I'd rather have our global headquarters than Chicago. As Brett said, this city has all the foundation and all the talent pool you need to build a great company. One thing about Chicago is it's the most diversified economy in the whole country. And what people don't realize is even if you're in crypto, you still need finance people, you need lawyers, you need people for marketing, you need compliance, and Chicago just has such a large talent pool. So for us, it was a no-brainer to be in Chicago. Obviously, FTX US is now in Chicago. We have Decasonic in Chicago. So we're building a great ecosystem here, and I feel the energy every single day. And then we have an administration that's done a bunch of things to really want to help businesses want to be here, whether it's what's been happening with World Business Chicago or Think Chicago, who we just had in our office for Think Chicago Lollapalooza, which with a bunch of college students there. The city's at the front lines of engagement and outreach, and the city also sells itself. Not only do people work here, but they want to live and they want to play here. And Chicago has great values, and it's a great place not just to work, but to live and to play as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And as you think about that, you mentioned multiple different parties. So Samir, the community here, you're involved in so many things that are bringing together other parties. How do you think of what the landscape is today and what it could be in the future?
Well, I'll say, by the way, you made the exact pitch. I hope we got that on video. We're going to clip that, put it all over social media. And I just have a tremendous respect for you and what you've built. And you were one of the shining stars, I think, of our entrepreneurial community. So I'll tell you a story in terms of what's emblematic as to why Chicago's hot right now. Yesterday, we stood with a bunch of executives at Google, and they announced that they were buying a gigantic office building downtown and turning it into basically another headquarters for Google, kind of like a regional HQ. And it's, I think well over 1.4 million square feet. And it's the single largest announcement of a corporate expansion in the history of Chicago. So, wow. I mean, we can applaud that. So I think people are worried, right? Post-COVID, like what's going to happen to cities? Well, the same way that I think Google anchored this district, the Fulton Market District, and how it transformed it, they see that opportunity right in the most transit-connected area in downtown Chicago, and that whole area is going to just be a different place in 10 years, and certainly the city is going to make investments. So for us, I think the reason why Google made that decision, the reason why I built my company here, the reason why you guys are here, talent and the diversity of that talent, infrastructure, unlike basically every other large city in the country, you can get to both of our airports on a train. Imagine that. And then, of course, the fact that you can have a great quality of life and it's affordable. But the two things that I would mention that are new right now, the first is we are seeing a lot of climate refugees come to Chicago. We are the most climate resilient city in the country, and the Great Lakes are a tremendous asset. And I think over the long run, that is a very important trend to keep in mind as you're making decisions. And then also values. We are seeing too much very troublesome legislation passed in too many states, especially with Roe v. Wade being turned back, where states or cities are trying to tell you how you should live your life. And that's not what we believe in Chicago. We want your employees to live the lives that they want to live. I think that's the future. That matters for the future of talent. That's why you need to be in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, the trend there, you can't help but to hear that and think about inclusion and just being inclusive. And what we do in this community is all about building it from the ground up and engaging with anyone, regardless of their background or their experience. So Gabby, thinking through that, how do you think about inclusive economic growth through vehicles such as Web3, crypto type innovation?
Sure. So I think it's a really good question, and it's something that I've spent, the majority of my career focusing on. I previously worked for the World Bank. I've worked for the International Federation of Accountants, and everything that I did was with a view towards building transparency, accountability, and strong capital markets so that you would deliver equitable and inclusive economic growth, opportunity, and prosperity. And so when we took a look at, bringing together different industry stakeholders from the entire Web3 ecosystem, talking about what it meant to really steward an industry, raise it up from the beginning, and to think about, making sure that we were representative of small and medium businesses as well as larger. Why? Because these are your engines of economic growth. Many times they're owned by women, by minorities that are traditionally excluded from having a public voice and say in the direction of a new and emerging industry. And so, a lot of what we've done around the Global Digital Asset and Cryptocurrency Association is really maybe think a little bit differently about what it means to advance industry stewardship and self-regulation. And I think a lot of that is because, one, we're based in a very international city, Chicago. Because of the two airports, because of the dynamic ecosystem that exists here, because of the vibrancy of many of the communities, we benefit from having those types of diverse viewpoints. And that diversity is really what's beautiful about raising up an industry. And so, from our side, it was a no-brainer to be based here in Chicago. To draw upon the amazing, we call it the plumbing ecosystem of a lot of the traditional financial sector. To be able to lean upon a lot of people who were foundational, like David Carmen and some of the others, in bringing up financial technologies, as well as leveraging some of what we've seen even around the concept of self-regulation. There's a lot that's here to draw upon, and that inclusivity, I think, permeates all of what we do and is front of mind and definitely center in bringing forward such a new and dynamic industry.
Yeah. Ben, as someone who's been building here for a while, as you started and where you are now, how have you seen that inclusion grow? How have you tapped into the community more broadly?
Yeah, so I think with crypto and with Web 3.0, sort of inclusivity is at the ethos of that. Traditionally, the legacy financial system wasn't always the most inclusive thing, and crypto has leveled the playing field. At our kiosk, for instance, you don't even need a bank account to buy crypto. Average transaction size a couple $100, so we believe that everyone who wants to get involved in crypto should. And then Web 3.0, I don't think it's fully hit people how exciting Web 3.0 is and how it could totally just change the dynamics of everything from owning your own data to the monetization of content. Unfortunately, even with content, a lot of people who make great content, they don't always get the rewards for it, or people don't get to own their data. And Web 3.0 takes the power back from those centralized gatekeepers to the individual. And then I think you hit the nail on the head, like, and you were talking about Chicago values too. Like, this is a city that wants to bring people up, that wants to make sure everyone is part of this growth. It's not just about growing, but it's about how you grow. And you have to be very intentional about that. And it might be crypto winter in general, but at CoinFlip, we're still going full speed ahead. We're still hiring in the city. When we do our job interviews, we're looking for people who may have been passed up for certain reasons outside of their control, that, you know, that could be a diamond in the rough. We just launched our venture fund, CoinFlip Ventures, which is going to have a big focus on Chicago-based businesses, and we're looking for that next generation of entrepreneurs, and we're looking specifically for underrepresented founders there.
Yeah, and that really leads me to something, you know, very passionate about. You know, I'm first generation. There's this notion of breaking into venture capital or startups, and when you're younger, it almost seems like you can see it, but you can't reach it. Right, and what's interesting about Web3 is there's not a day go by that you don't talk to someone from any type of community, and they're bringing it up and they can relate to it, or they're engaging with it. So with that said, you know, Samir, I have a question, you know, specifically for you around the Chicago communities, which is, how do we embrace and involve all types of communities in the innovation regarding Web3? Because so oftentimes, you know, we put our best foot forward, we try to engage, and as time passes, we realize certain communities have been left behind.
So I will say, when you look at the legacy kind of technology story in Chicago, fastest growing part of our economy, but, you know, pre-pandemic, while the tech sector in Chicago was the fastest growing part of our economy, it was about 10% people of color, and the city is about 65% people of color. So we knew we have a lot of work to do there. You know, where we are today, we have, I think, you know, the most diverse founder base in the city, and absolutely the highest percentage of women founders in the country. And so we're proud of that, but we're not done. We have to keep going, and I think you heard Ben talk about those values. So what it means to the city, you know, our current administration under Mayor Lightfoot, we're very focused on what we call investing in the South and the West Side, so Invest Southwest. And so we've moved nearly $2 billion of capital from the public sector, private sector, and nonprofit sector into 10 community areas on the South and the West Side to really make sure that the flywheel of the economy in those areas moves, and that you have the basic amenities that you have in so many other parts of the city. It's a narrative of really tackling inequality. Now, where Web3 fits into that is, you know, and this was something the mayor and I really paid attention to, is a much higher proportion of Black and brown Chicago was engaging with crypto and blockchain. And that's interesting, and that's to the point you made, it's a little bit of an indictment, I think, on traditional financial institutions. So we were paying attention. But the question is, how can Web3 really be relevant in the lives of people on the South and the West Side, as an example? And that's why we partnered with FTX, and I have to give Brett, who was on the previous panel, a lot of credit. They stood up with us and they said, you know what? We're going to launch the largest universal basic income pilot that is led by the private sector here in Chicago. And so we're doing the largest government-run UBI pilot, a guaranteed income pilot. They're doing the largest one from the private sector. And so we partner them with a community group. They're taking returning residents who are formerly incarcerated. When they get a job, they get $500 in like an FTX wallet with a debit card. And they're going to be doing an academic study on that for a year. That's a great example of how the tool can be used for inclusivity. And the second chapter for us is now we're looking at remittances, where I think remittances has a great case study in terms of reducing transaction costs. We are the most immigrant-friendly city in the country, and I think focusing on remittances will be another great example. But I think my question to all of you is, how can we make sure that the Web3 narrative and the companies you're building are solving real problems for the people in our neighborhoods? I think too often in other parts of the country, you have a lot of like hype, a lot of, you know, like let's do CityCoin and all this kind of stuff. Let's focus on being relevant and solving real problems. That's what entrepreneurship's about.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. And by solving real problems, you inherently become sustainable. And I think that is a key that all of us think about within our community. So before we open it up for Q&A, just quick fire through the three of you. If you had, the LinkedIn headline or the Twitter headline in terms of what would you say to make sure this is sustainable? And I know I'm putting you on the spot on this one. What would that be? What would you say to our community?
Ooh.
So I think, from our side, we talk about orientation in the public interest, right? And sometimes, again, like I've worked in a lot of emerging economies, right? You're dealing with volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. A lot of what you see even in navigating some of where the future of Web3 is going. And the reality is that when you are faced with so many different challenges strategically, the best position is always in the public interest, because ultimately you are part of the public and you will benefit. And so if you're looking at a long-term sustainable impact that you're trying to have, I'd say orient in the public interest. That's my headline.
Amazing. Ben, anything?
Yeah, I think, for instance, in business, sustainability now with this recession is about having a real business model, not having hype, really building, keeping your head down. But from a community perspective, what sustainability means, I think it's about building an ecosystem and getting those iterations. It's not enough to just have one event or one donation or one connection of someone who needs a job with an employer who's hiring, but how do we make that into an ecosystem that sort of runs itself and make that a positive feedback loop? So anything we can do to orient from single actions to repeating iterations in an ecosystem, I think that's what gets us there.
Right.
For me, I'm looking at Tony Carmen back there, who runs one of the great art expos in Chicago. My headline would be, Chicago harnesses the power of NFTs to finally compensate and lift up the creative economy of the city in the way it deserves.
Amazing.
I vote for your headline.
I like that headline too.
With that said, happy to open it up for questions.
Thank you. So a lot of people say, like, if NFT was the term of 2021, DAOs are the emerging term for 2022. So Wyoming legally accepts a DAO establishment as LLC with smart contract ownership. And in Colorado, they accept crypto for taxes. So my point is, like, if we want to see more entrepreneurship and movement, it would be great to have, like, even in Illinois, accepting DAOs, legal establishment, and taxes around it. What are your thoughts?
Well, that one's probably for me. So, we don't regulate this in the city, but what I will say is I talk to my counterparts in the state every week, and I'll have that conversation with them. I think it's a great idea, and usually it's just, how do we do that in a way that, the government at the end of the day grants legitimacy to everything, and I think that's why this conversation is interesting. But we also have to make sure that with that legitimacy comes a tremendous amount of responsibility from the government, and so usually that's the barrier. And I think there's some very creative people at the state and the legislature thinking about this, and it's on my list.
Another one probably for you, but anyone could answer this. So we talked a lot about the opportunities to invest in this technology, very exciting. There's also starting to be some opportunities to utilize the technology due to that step function increase in how any community could coordinate with this stuff. I'm curious, obviously there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty, but what do you think are the biggest hurdles to get to a point where, like, the city of Chicago could start looking at utilizing some of these technologies?
Well, I can start, and I'm curious what the two of you think. Governments are not great at technology innovation. I'm a rare founder who's in a government role, but I see it every day. Like, we can't compensate. None of you would probably work for a government salary, right? And I think there's a structural misalignment there that's really hard to overcome because we want to be so innovative, but you don't always have the kind of structure to be able to do that. So I think for us, pilot is always the best way to start. We want to be the customer and anchor customer of startups. That's usually to get in the door with the pilot so we can just get over the inertia of bureaucracy. So I like that a lot. And I'd say the second item that I've been thinking a lot about is how to use Web3 tools for more types of digital authentication for all sorts of different government documents, deeds. Think about everything the government does that's like a paperwork nightmare. I think Web3 could be a big solution to that. We definitely don't have the capabilities of anyone in our tech ecosystem that we contract with today to do that properly. So that's why doing some pilots in very narrow areas to overcome skepticism is going to be a key priority for us.
I think, again, I can speak to working in 50 different countries with all different sorts of capacities in public sector. And I think one of the things that we've tried to do from the Global Digital Asset and Cryptocurrency Association side, as well as whenever you're talking about a financial sector or economic transformation, because really that's what we're living through. It's not just a new asset class, it's a complete move away from centralization towards decentralization. So some of the things that impact or advance this space are first and foremost public-private partnerships. So engagement between the city of Chicago, companies like CoinFlip, organizations like ours, so that we can share knowledge, enhance understanding, and that from the side of government and public sector, they can follow emerging trends and issues. They can feel comfortable and confident to step into this space and make policy. And at the end of the day, what you have is better, more informed decision making, which raises everybody up, okay? So I think public-private partnerships are key. And then I think events like today's, bringing people together, letting them mix, mingle, build relationships, network, and ensuring that that is an open opportunity for both public sector, law enforcement, as well as private sector, so that everybody comes together and starts to learn as one.
Yeah, and I would say what I've noticed in crypto is sort of a movement from pure investment and speculation into utility. And a lot of times the interface and the usability is sort of the last thing that comes around in crypto. You can imagine, like, even in 2015 when you were buying Bitcoin, people were using paper wallets because there wasn't a great way to store it. So the interfaces will come around, but I think to your point about pilots and things like that, instead of always trying to change the world or, we're going to put the city government in the metaverse, what if we could just record deeds on the blockchain?
Right.
And I think those very narrow, specific uses, even if you want to look at, whenever there's something new, like think about Amazon and e-commerce. At first they're like, we're not going to do e-commerce, we're just going to sell books. A very narrow use case. And I think there is some argument for doing it incrementally. And we can't put the government in the metaverse today, nor would we probably want to. But we can have digital ID, or we can do record keeping on the blockchain. I think finding those very narrow, specific action items is the key.
Great. Thank you.